you have a serious problem, you're under a lot of pressure to tackle it, well, seriously, in a serious frame of mind. So that's not just true in organisations where there's pressure to produce results and to be reliable, but that can also be the situation just individually. When there's something that's really on your mind that's really important to solve, it can put a lot of stress on you and start to kind of blinker you down to your approaches to thinking about that. But as Tom also mentioned, games can be a very powerful way of getting through that, because the features of games are just the kind of things that you might need to solve your problem. So within games, you've got creativity, you've got communication, you've got discovery, you're open to surprise, to serendipity, and to explore. So all of these features of games are the kinds of things that can help you dig yourself out of this serious problem. So I suppose I should say really what I mean by games in this situation then. So in a game, the normal rules of life, of behaviour, are suspended. Okay? So then they're replaced by the rules of the game. So what you do is you create an alternative world, the game world, which you enter into by agreeing to play the game. And that's the other thing, that playing the game is by agreement. So anyone who enters into that game is there by agreement, and so it's a collaborative exercise, and it becomes safe by virtue of doing that. So you have this alternative world which has elements of safety in it. So games have rules, they have boundaries, they may have artifacts and objects that have special significance and behaviour within that game world. And they also have goals. And the thing about games is that they come to an end when some predetermined goal or state is reached. And at that point, the game world closes and you're back in the room, you're back into ordinary reality. So there are a set of practices that capture these games that can help you solve problems, to innovate and be creative, collected under the heading of Gamestorming. There's a book. So the way this came about is that the authors of the book there see themselves very much like the Brothers Grimm, who travelled around and collected folk tales. And they wrote them down because they could see that these things would be of interest to other people. They could see that they might actually fade away and die out if nobody documented them. So this is a collection of activities, a collection of games, which they put together. So they're not exclusive to this book necessarily. Some of them were created by the authors and written into the book, but some of them they're also collected on their travels around Silicon Valley and companies that they worked with or visited. So just like the tales that the Brothers Grimm collected and set down for posterity came from a deep heritage and have evolved. So, for example, Snow White might turn into a film or a cartoon or a panto. So these games also come from a heritage and they evolve as well. So you can pick them up and work them to your situation as well, just as freely as you might take Snow White and work it into a school play or whatever it was that was relevant to you. But some of the features of these games, some of the underlying characteristics are worth noting because they're the things that drive these activities. So one of the things they're very strong on is visual thinking. So using sketching and diagramming to convey ideas and to share and to communicate what it is that you're thinking about and really get what other people are thinking. Also, they talk a lot about nodes. So these are like, as Tom talked about there, about ideas. So nodes might be ideas or pieces of information, which you can break apart. You can separate them, you can group them together, you can rank them in order, you can put them in a flow, you can do whatever with them. But the important thing is to work with those nodes and to configure them in lots of different ways to create lots of different possibilities and lots of different concepts. And the other aspect is people. These games are about people. So there's a lot of elements of game design in there and also elements of psychology that take people out of that kind of serious frame of mind and step them into another world which can allow them to tap into their productive and creative selves. So my adventures with Gamestorming began, I guess, about a year and a half ago. I'd come across the idea of being referenced in lots of places. I got the book, I read the book, I thought there's some good stuff in here. So I work in Aviva, as Tom mentioned. I've started running a Gamestorming club. Every month we get together and go through some of these games. We practice them, we understand what they were aimed at doing and how they worked, and we'd actually practice them there. And we've worked our way steadily through the book and moved somewhat from a community of interest, just people who are kind of interested in doing this stuff, to a community of practice, where we've actually taken these out into our daily work and then brought them back and reported to each other and shared our experiences. And some of the people in this room have been on that adventure with me as well. So I'd like to share with you some of the books, some of the games that are captured in the book there, some of those techniques, and then we'll actually try one out. Okay, so let's have a look at that's forward, that's backwards, that's forwards. Some of them are very simple. So we talked about visual thinking. This is a visual agenda. So this is how you might set out the agenda for a 1-hour meeting, and how you might just post that on a wall, and so people can get a very quick impression of how you're intending to spend the time. And it also makes it rather more difficult for the agenda to slip, because it's out there and it's posted on the wall, and it's in a way that you can get at a glance. Very simple technique. This is known as the low-tech social network. So this is a kind of ice-breaking activity, but one that can go on through the day if you have, for example, a longer session. So how this works is that you get everyone present to just do a card which represents themselves, so they do a bit of a sketch there, maybe put some information about themselves, and then start to discover their connections with the other people present. So then you can post up the cards and draw the connections between them, and you can label the connections. So if these guys went to school together, then that's a connection they have, part of the network that's within the room, and you can just label that up. And yeah, so this can run throughout the day. So as you discover new connections with people, they get drawn on. Right. This is an ideation technique, a technique for finding new ideas. And it was originally devised as a way of finding new product ideas. So let's say you're a toy company. You might put together a couple of dimensions of your product. So along the top there, we've got one dimension that describes your product, which is types of toy. And then down the side here, you've got ways of playing with those toys. So types of play. And then very simply, you kind of look for it that you go through the grid, and where those two aspects intersect, you find an idea that combines those two aspects. Okay? So then it becomes a bit like bingo, because you're trying to fill the squares on the board. So combining construction and instruments might give you an idea for a toy where you build your own instrument, which you can play. Dolls racing might suggest wind-up dolls, which you then battle against each other down a racetrack. Okay? And the more unusual the combination, typically the more compelling the idea, the more interesting it is. And the idea is not just that you pick a few, but you actually saturate the board. And the reason for that is that where you find difficulty creating new ideas, that's probably where the most original ideas are going to come from, because that's probably where other people have given up and said this is fruitless. So there's something that allows you to take these different elements and combine them together to create new ideas. This illustrates a technique called brain writing. So brainstorming, you generate ideas, you call them out. In brain writing, you write down your idea on a card. So this gets over quite a lot of the hurdles that brainstorming traditionally introduces. So in brainstorming, very often the loudest voice is the one that gets heard. People tend to follow the leader a bit. And there's also, although you're not supposed to criticise the ideas as they come out, there's a understanding that people will be kind of, scoring the ideas as they go up. So in brain writing, you write down on a card, and then pass that card round the table. So you get a card from someone else with the germ of an idea already on it. And then you do the yes and thing. So you improvise from that idea. So you build on it. So there's no direction there to try and break it down, because you have to take it and build it up into new ideas. So as the cards start to circulate, they get more and more input from other people, and the ideas can get built up and built in different directions. Oh, we do Pechakucha, which is one of the techniques that's mentioned in the book there. Pechakucha is a short talk format. So if you've come to lightning talks before, you might be familiar with the idea. So in Pechakucha, you have presentations with 20 slides. Each slide lasts 20 seconds and it's auto-advanced. So there's no waffling on about one particular slide and getting carried away with it. You need to move on quite briskly. And one of the advantages of this is obviously that it keeps people moving through, but also that you can encapsulate a topic in a very short space of time. So we've done all sorts of talks here. We've had people presenting about their preparations for running a marathon. We've had talks about astronomy. We've had talks about how to build a medieval musical instrument, rodent control, cider making, and so on. And these short talks can give you new models and new insights from other domains in exactly the way that Tom was referencing there. So you can see how things work in other situations and see whether there's something that you can learn from. Here's a technique called the squid. So this is an idea. This is a technique for exploring a topic and exploring your knowledge and your understanding of a particular topic. And in this game, you start off with a topic, so it might be how can we respond to something that the competitor's done, how can we export to Bhutan, or whatever. So the first thing you do is you generate questions on that topic. So that's all that happens at this stage. Generate questions on the topic on post-it notes. Stick them up and link them to the topic. Okay. The next thing that happens is that you generate answers to those questions. So each question could spawn multiple answers. Some questions may not get any answers at all in the room then. And then once you've had the answers and had a look at those, then you go through another phase of generating questions, another phase of generating answers, and so on. And if you saw that documentary on the giant squid off the coast of Japan the other night, you can kind of imagine that this might go on for a very, very long way. And you have a long chain of question and answer processes. So this does a number of things. One is that it captures those questions and the answers. And you can have parallel conversations going on through this process. In a regular meeting, the topic can ramble a bit and go in different ways. In this technique, you capture the themes of the talk, the themes of the conversation, and you make them permanent and you develop them. So the several strands get documented. You can see where you've got areas of consensus. You can see where you've got areas that you really don't know answers to, where you need to do more research. And it starts to get into people doing parallel thinking. So one of the things Tom had as a resource was the 6 thinking hats, where people think in parallel. So here, it's a mini version of that, because you're thinking in a questioning mode, you're thinking in an answering mode, and in a questioning mode. So it tends to take away that sort of I'm right and you're wrong dynamic that can creep into conversation. So there's lots of stuff in here, whether you get the book, whether you get the app, whether you go to the website. There's a huge range of resources there, which I really would recommend to you to have a look at and to consider which ones you can use in your own situation. So let's take one of the games from the Gamestorming library and give it a go. So I hope we'll get three things out of this, really. So one is you'll get a feel for how Gamestorming can work. So much better than me just showing slides and talking about it. So this is a slightly more involved game than some of the very short ones that we've seen. The second thing is that this is a technique which you may find useful. It's a specific technique which started off life as a method of market research in product development, but could actually be applied to any aspect of your organisation. And thirdly, I hope that you'll
that wasn't conspicuous at all.
You'll be taking part in an authentic piece of collaborative research, because the topic that we're going to be exploring is the topic of hot sauce. Hot sauce has been going for about 3 years now, and it's a good stage to take stock and find out what it is that people have got out of hot sauce over that time, what they value, and where they would like to see hot sauce developing in the future. So this game is called Shape the Future. It's also known as Prune the Future. Pruning in the sense that a gardener might prune a specimen tree to shape the way it grows, whether it's tall, broad, even, uneven, sculptured, or whatever. And it takes the metaphor of a tree. So, here we go. So, in this game, and what I'm going to do is I'll just explain the 3 stages of the game before you break out into groups. And so that's the idea behind the numbers which you're going to have, because those will help you to get together into groups. So I'll talk through the 3 stages, and then we'll set up and run with it. So to bring this to life, you have leaves, these leaf-shaped.
Can I get an ooh for the
So the lower area of the tree here then represents hot sauce at the moment. So it's your experience of hot sauce today and leading up to today. So to bring it to life, what you're going to do is to just write onto the leaves things that relate to your experience. So they might be things that you've attended, it might be things that you have found particularly memorable. So if you just take a moment to think about something about hot sauce that's really stuck in your memory, things that you've learned, things where you've got benefit that you've been able to use and apply in your life. So write those on there and stick them on the lower part of the tree there. Okay. So as you do that, you can start to move them around and let the tree take shape. So you can group together. These nodes, these leaves, these little ideas or thoughts or bits of information that you put there. You can group them together into clusters, and you can group them around a branch. And if there's a particular theme to that group, then you can write the name of that on the branch that they relate to. Okay? So one item on each leaf, so you can generate lots of leaves, one item on each leaf, move them around and bring your tree to life. Okay, so we'll do that for about 10 minutes, and then I think we'll just kind of go around and suggest that you move on to the second stage at that point. So the second stage is to start to think about the near future. So how hot sauce could change or evolve in the near future in a way that would make it kind of more relevant to you, more useful, more valuable, more interesting. Okay, so again, one item on each leaf. Put up the leaves. If you've developed themes on the branches there, then you can relate them to the themes that you've identified in there. Okay, so what I'd say is really just have fun with this. Just embrace the metaphor here. Remember that trees don't just have leaves, they have seeds and fruits, they have wildlife that shelters in them or eat them. They're in an ecosystem. So just take that and run with it and personalize these in any way that you like. Okay. So the middle part of the canopy there, things that might change in the near future that would give you value. And then after about 5-10 minutes of that, we'll move on to the last stage of the game, which is to populate the outer part of the canopy. So this is talking about the further into the future. So this is the longer term. So think about how hot sauce could be different in the future. How those themes might develop in the future in a way that really offers you something of interest, something of value. And just talk with the other people in your group who are playing the game with you. Talk about why those things, why those ideas and why the things that you're talking about there would really offer something to you. And perhaps even write a note on that down on the leaves. Okay? So when we get to this point, then after about 5 or 10 minutes of developing those themes, we'll bring things to a close. But you can really go out on a limb here. And the more out there your ideas and thoughts are, the further out you can place them. Okay. The reason why this game is powerful is because if you're researching an organisation or a product or a service, what you end up with is a very rich picture of the things that your customers, people who have a relationship with that product or service, the things that they value. And not just the things that they value, but the relationships that they have with your product and how they express those relationships and how they understand the ways in which they could foresee your product shaping in a way that would actually work better for them. Which is quite possibly in ways that you maybe never would have imagined from your own perspective. So a very rich picture of the relationship that customers have and the way they would like to see your product or service being shaped. As someone taking part in this, you've got as customers and users of the service, which is why you've been invited to play this game, you have an opportunity to talk about your relationship with the product or service, and also to see how you could shape its future in a really very visual way. And for people interested in game design, you can start to see some of the elements of game design in here which might make this fun to do. So you can see elements of progression and completion. You can see how there's self-expression in here. So a number of ways in which this actually generates fun for people. So once we've run this, so that would take us until about 7 o'clock, I guess. So we won't reconvene at that point, but there will be time for you to just break off and to have a look at the trees that other people have created, see how they're different from the ones that you have you've created in your groups, and to talk to people about the experience of taking part and their thoughts about that guided them to create the trees that they did.
And we'll photograph them and post them.
Yes, that's right.
So
there's the problem. We're not going to attempt to sort of synthesise this into a single unified view of what we all think, because it would take us to a bit time. But what we do want us to do is go away and have a look at it and try to sort of organise what we learn and just obviously try and apply it into how what sort of things are going forward. One other thing, it's brilliant. There are a few new faces here today, people who've never been to a hot sauce session before. That's fantastic. And you must be thinking, I don't know. But then just channel that experience. Like, why did you come tonight? You know, how did you go? What's tonight been like? What, you know? So you have got an experience, and actually that first experience is really equally interesting as someone who's been many, many times over many, many years. So you know, don't think you haven't got something to offer.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm going to bring you back to the first stage. I think if we were doing this, you know, really as a research exercise, what we'd do is we'd talk about the first stage, and then when you spent a bit of time doing that, then I'd explain what the second stage was and so on, so that you weren't kind of overloaded with the whole of the game at the outset. So I want to kind of bring your focus back to the first stage, which is about you and hot sauce and your experience.